So what happened to Aquarius's highly toxic fuel? According to NASA's website,
the LM re-entered and burned in the Earth's atmosphere over the southwest Pacific. Any surviving pieces impacted in the deep ocean off the coast of New Zealand.
And there you have it. That's all that's left of lunar module Aquarius. A few insignificant pieces. No record of toxic hydrazine falling from space. And this had been expected all along. 2 days earlier, the Sydney Morning Herald had this to say about what they called the ungainly lunar craft. The fragile Aquarius was designed for work in the moon's airless environment and could not survive re-entry. Once jettisoned, it will hit the atmosphere and disintegrate. Of course, taking into mind the additional nitrogen tetroxide and UDMH, this gives us a grand total of 5,000 pounds of toxic fuel. By any definition, a fully loaded ascent stage would have posed a greater health hazard than USA 193 packing a measly 1,000 pounds of fuel. And let's not forget Odyssey's jettisoned service module, which Jim Lovell claims was packing 400,000 pounds of unburnt fuel. On the day of Apollo 13's recovery, the Herald reported, after the dead hulk of the service module separated from the still-connected command module and lunar module, it plunged into the Earth's atmosphere, disintegrating about the same time as the astronauts' re-entry. Undoubtedly, the Apollo program was one of the most extensively documented events in human history. Thousands of astronomers, reporters, and scientists alike have recorded this historical event in print and video. Even the astronauts involved have made their livings by selling stories about their daily adventures to the moon. Knowing this, how many of these famous and infamous historians document the danger of Apollo 13's unburnt toxic fuel falling on people from space? The answer? 0. The only concerns of hazardous fuel falling from space had nothing to do with Apollo 13's unburnt hypergolic propellants.
Nuclear fuel to fall into sea. Houston, Wednesday. Falling into the atmosphere at the same time as Apollo 13 will be a graphite cylinder containing 8.36 pounds of radioactive plutonium. The 16.5-inch long cylinder is expected to fall into the Pacific Ocean. The cylinder is designed to withstand the heat of the re-entry and impact, and should sink to the bottom of the sea. The plutonium is in the heart of an atomic generator developed by the AEC, which was supposed to have been left on the moon to provide electricity for lunar experiments. On the bottom of the sea, the cylinder should slowly rust away for years while the plutonium gradually loses its radioactivity. The cylinder is being returned to Earth because it is attached to the Lunar Excursion Module, and will fall free because of its heat resistance, as the module is torn apart and burned due to friction in the Earth's atmosphere.
And in the April 20th, 1970 reports that followed the LEM's re-entry,
planes test for leak in isotope. Houston, Sunday. US Air Force planes swept over the Pacific Ocean at the weekend, taking air samples as a precaution against a packet of deadly radioactive plutonium-238 ditched aboard Apollo 13's lunar module yesterday, Sydney time.
The radioisotope, sealed in a graphite cask, weighs 40 pounds and is believed to have survived the disintegration of the lunar module Aquarius when it struck the 5,000 plus degree temperature on re-entry into the Earth's atmosphere.
The package was taken aloft by the Apollo 13 crew to power a series of scientific experiments on the moon. It is estimated to have plunged into the Pacific Ocean about 500 miles south of the spot where the astronauts splashed down. This would be 600 miles north of Auckland. NASA officials said before Apollo 13 jettisoned Aquarius that there was a hint of danger of the package leaking radiation into the Pacific. However, the planes were sent aloft at the weekend to take air samples just in case something went wrong, NASA said. It will take some time before air tests are completed and analysed.
It was later established that the radiation had not been detected. So apparently, this plutonium rod managed to survive while the rest of the spacecraft was torn apart and disintegrated. And what of its unburnt fuel? We are told nothing. The only logical explanation for this is that it too was vaporized. You'd think that if a spacecraft fully loaded with hydrazine was such a catastrophic environmental risk, there would have been immense concern of such when Lunar Module Aquarius re-entered the atmosphere over Fiji. There was zero worry and zero documentation of such, because once you weigh all the evidence, the danger of hydrazine falling on us from space was nothing more than a government deception used to mask their true intentions. No different to the claims of weapons of mass destruction or Iraqi links to 9/11.
The terrorists attacked us and killed 3,000 of our citizens before we started the freedom agenda in the Middle East. What did Iraq have to do with what?
The attack on the World Trade Center.
Nothing, except for it's part of, and nobody's ever suggested in this administration that Saddam Hussein ordered the attack. Iraq was the lesson of September 11th is take threats before they fully materialize, Ken.
The destruction in space of a wayward American satellite hasn't gone down too well in China. The US government says the interception was a success, but warns the dangerous debris could still fall to Earth. Beijing believes that the operation was a disguised weapons test.
Russia and China criticised the launch. They say it was a weapons test and another step in a space-based arms race.
The time has come to accept what the shooting down of USA-193 was all along. The government evening the odds with China, and in doing so, wrapping the nature behind it in myth to cloud what they were really doing. The threat posed by USA-193 was, and always will be, non-existent. And yet, there are those who will sell this lemon to the public despite claiming they defend science from those who attack it.
Now what we know is that the satellite is called USA-193. It's a National Reconnaissance Office spy satellite, basically. This is the intelligence arm of the government. And so this satellite was designed to spy on people. Now, that sounds bad, but in fact, there are people who don't like the US government, oddly enough. And so it's probably a good idea to keep track of what these folks are doing. Good intelligence tends to prevent wars and prevent violence. So good intelligence is important. So in fact, I actually support these efforts to actually spy on people. Well, the problem is the fuel that is on board this thing is called hydrazine. It's like ammonia, and it's noxious. It's evil stuff. You don't want this stuff falling intact. There's a ton of it on board this thing. And if it falls to the ground, it could disperse in the cloud and hurt people. And the problem is fuel tanks are big and lightweight, and so they have a lot of drag, and so they tend to slow down very rapidly, and that means they can fall to the ground intact because they don't burn up. And so that's really important. It's important to blow something like this up so that the noxious chemical doesn't get to the earth. Now, something like this happened in 2007. The Chinese did something similar, and people are comparing these two things, and really that's not fair. What the Chinese did was really kind of evil. It was very bad. Well, what's happening in this case with the US satellite is that this thing is coming in. It is going to disintegrate in the Earth's atmosphere. We do want to blow it up before it does it because it does have that hydrazine on it.
Would it be rude to believe that the shoot-down of USA-193 would not be the first time the government deceived the world to cloud their military strategy? Looking back to the Cold War between the US and USSR, and their current post-9/11 climate with China, the similarities are striking. The USSR launched the Sputnik, and the Americans even the odds with the Explorer. China shoots down a weather satellite, and the US shoots down a spy satellite to even the odds. John F. Kennedy promised to land the first men on the moon. George W. Bush promises to return the first men to the moon. Kennedy's goal was set when the Russians had brought America to its knees. Bush set his goal when the shuttle program had been brought to a standstill. All three presidents in power during the space race were up to their eyes in the Vietnam War. George W. Bush promised his vision for space exploration at the height of the War on Terror. During the race to the moon, the Gemini and Mercury programs were faced with near fatalities. Many shuttle flights after Columbia faced the same falling debris that could have jeopardized their crew's safety. NASA didn't take any notice of the dangers leading up to the Apollo 1 fire. NASA ignored warnings of falling debris during Columbia's fatal flight. NASA passed off fake flights to the moon as the real thing. The United States shot down their own satellite and then falsely claimed that they did it to protect people. The CIA proposed using John Glenn's possible death to invade Cuba. George W. Bush used the 9/11 attacks to justify a US-led invasion into Iraq. And so on and so on and so on.